Hello, I'm Scott Hackworth of Industry Insights, and I'm pleased to be back with you for this quarter's weather report for the Pool and Hot Tubs Alliance. Today, we're going to dive into the latest insights and trends that affect builders, service and maintenance professionals, and retailers in the industry. Let's get started with the key findings. I like starting off with the top challenges that are being faced by the leaders of the industry. Number one, and inching up a little bit more, is economic factors such as inflation, consumer spending patterns, and a lot of that makes sense given the political climate, given that this is a political year, and so we're hearing a lot about the economy, and and also there's some true patterns out there that are impacting businesses. So it makes sense that would be inching up. We see that in many of the industries that we study. Maintaining profitability was the second most common, and then recruiting and retaining skilled employees remained on business leaders' minds. So the top three have been the top three for the past 6 quarters. So now let's take just a minute. We're going to talk about the U.S. economy and what's happening from a larger perspective. Real GDP. And so last quarter, it rose quite a bit. So we saw a 3% GDP ranking, which is very strong and was a little higher than expectations. And so we saw that right out. And here at Industry Insights, we're expecting the year to end out on solid footing. Not as high as the 3%. The long-term average is 2.2, 2.5 in that range. And so we expect it's going to ebb down closer to the 2% to finish out the year. But we do expect it's still going to be on very solid footing despite some of the challenges, some of the headwinds that the industry is facing. The unemployment rate has continued to inch up and so reached 4.3% last month. And that compares to 3.4% last April of 2023. So so in about 15 months, we've seen a sizable rise in the unemployment rate, though by historic standards, it's still well below the 4.5 marker of full employment. So we are still in a very, very good labor market period, although some of the stress, some of the pressure is starting to subside for the industry. So that's definitely a good thing for business leaders, business owners who are trying to hire, and it also reduces some of the wage pressure that businesses have been under. So overall, that is definitely a good take for businesses. Inflation also continues to go the right direction. So that has been easing considerably. We can see here on the right side, seeing that has sloped down, reached 2.9% and last month. And so we see that continue to slide. And we don't, here at Industry Insights, we don't feel like we're going to reach the 2% target that the Fed has set anytime soon, but we do think it's going to continue to ease down. So maybe in that 2.7 range is where it's going to sit for a while, and but still, compared to where we were just a couple years ago, still very, very positive for the economy and for businesses. And then looking at the Fed funds rate, they rose rates very, very steeply following COVID and all of the stimulus funding and everything there to get wraps on this inflation number. And so it has been riding at that 5.3%. So it's just been sitting there. We, along with everybody else, fully expect that the Fed is going to reduce rates later this month, here in September. And so we do see that. And then we believe also that that'll be followed by 1, possibly 2 more rate reductions later this year. Now, we do see each just being a quarter point. We think it'll be a very measured, very consistent reduction. And but then it's going to be kind of a wait and see. We're going to pull the lever, see what happens, pull the lever, see what happens, and just wait, because you don't want to stimulate the economy so much that inflation spikes back again. So the Fed is very, very governed in how they're approaching with data and how they're watching very closely. So, but we do expect a couple more reductions, and we do hope that that really does stimulate consumer spending, especially with the large ticket items that require funding, require loans, require a mortgage. And so we would like to see that. And then housing permits, just looking here quickly, we see that that continued to slide last month, and housing is very undersupplied, and so has been, and it continues to worsen. A lot of that is demand side, and so there's just not the ability to afford the housing. And so the supply issue is going to remain until something happens, whether it's some regulations, some tax changes, possibly some of the reduction from the Fed. Hopefully some of that starts stimulating more activity, because we do need to see that uptick. We have to work through some of these supply issues. All right, so now we're going to turn our focus back specifically to the pool and hot tubs industry. Looking at the builders. The way to interpret this graph here is we have the median sales numbers, and so a lot of this comes from the annual Business Operating Statistics Survey, and so we see that line, and then the orange dotted line is the forecast that the builders had told us. So essentially back in January, what they anticipated this year was going to bring for them. And so moving from the 4 million to about 4.35. However, our quarterly data has shown us that in reality, most builders are relatively flat, and that's where they've been, and that's where they expect themselves to be for the time being. And looking at their expectations over the next 12 months, we see that it's extremely balanced between those who expect growth, those who expect some decrease, and then we have 15% there in the middle that expects things to be largely unchanged. So very, very balanced, very mixed expectations for the year ahead. Amongst the service sector, so those who are doing service and repair within the industry, they expected some good growth, and they are largely experiencing that also. So they are very much in line with their expectations. And as we look over the next 12 months at what they expect, the vast majority are expecting growth. And so we do see a lot of orange here on this graph, indicating that they expect growth, and many of them expect growth of at least 6%. And then within the retailers. So retailers the past couple years have been a little sluggish compared to the other sectors, but they did tell us that they expected this year was going to be a pickup for them, and they have largely experienced what they expected. So we're seeing that, for the most part, they had told us that they expected to jump from 3.7 to about 4.1 for the typical, and it's looking to us like they'll land about 4. So still a pretty sizable growth. And for their expectations, we do see the majority are expecting some growth, and then 14% expect it to stay the same, and then the remainder expects a little bit of fall off. So looking specifically at some of the products, some of the services, new pool sales, we see that it has slid the past couple quarters, and so here in Q2, we had been a little more optimistic about how the new pool sales were going to go this year for this quarter. And so by and large, companies told us that they were more likely to have seen a decrease versus a year ago than they were to see an increase. And especially that's true amongst the backlog levels. So they've very much been chewing through the backlog, so that they have much less backlog currently on their books than they did a year ago at the same time. Remodel sales are decent. We did see some fall off versus Q1, and so we really started the year very optimistic about the remodels and what was happening. Remodels have really been big for the builders overall. As the new pool sales fell off, remodels really picked up. But here in Q2, we are seeing a little bit of slowdown in the remodels. And that's particularly true when we look at the backlog levels of the remodels, so the jobs that are on the books. We're seeing, it's basically a balance between the increases and the decreases, with a very large swath that have been about the same. Portable hot tubs, swim spas, they had experienced a very difficult 2023. But here, the last 4 quarters, we are seeing an uptick. And so even though it's very, very gradual, we are seeing some positive slope there. And so hopefully we're stabilizing. Hopefully we're moving out of some of the issues that had been experienced, and we're moving to more positive sales growth. And the backlog right now remains where, for most, they're decreasing the backlog levels versus where they may have been a year ago. And so 50% though said it's essentially unchanged because the orders are largely just being fulfilled when they're placed. So some closing thoughts. For the builders, about 40% experienced some increase during the quarter, though 50% saw a decrease. So the majority, or a larger portion, saw a decrease in sales. Pool sales dropped during the year, during the quarter versus last quarter in particular, and 2/3 of builders reported a decrease in their backlog levels. Remodel jobs also slowed versus where they had been in Q1, and particularly we are off in the backlog level for the remodel jobs. And expectations for the year ahead are very split among the builders. 45% predict an increase, 45% expect a decrease, and then 10% expected to be stable. So very mixed thoughts about the year ahead. Service and repair companies, however, are very much continue to just see strong growth ahead. 73% increased their sales during the quarter, and 80% expect to see the next 12 months bring continued growth for them. And then retailers, they saw mixed performance in Q2, where 41% saw an increase, 45% saw a decrease. And hot tubs remain slow going, though there is some positive slope there that we're starting to see. So hopefully we're moving to some positive sales levels for that on a year-over-year basis. And looking ahead, 61% expect positive sales growth, and while just 25% expect a decline. And so I want to thank you for joining me today as we did this brief overview of the latest industry trends from the Industry Pulse Survey. And so for more detailed information, you can always refer to the PHTA's website, where they have all of the information about the latest research and latest surveys and data that are available and being conducted. And if you have any questions about this presentation or any of the data that I've shared, please reach out to me. My contact information is right here on the screen. And until next quarter, this is Scott Hackworth, and I'm just signing off, wishing you a great day, and I want to thank you for watching.